Hi, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. It's Tuesday, May 28th today, and I'm sitting down to do a little bit of a planetary update. I've neglected to do a planetary update for a little bit because I've been out of town at an astrology conference. It's end of the month, and I'm preparing for my June horoscopes. And I've been doing a lot of birth chart demos, trying to help people get a sense for how I teach and some of the different techniques of traditional astrology, because I have a course coming up that starts on June 9th. If you are interested in that, the early bird rate is only available for a few more days through the end of this month. So you have a few more days to save if you want to join me and study in my class for the next year. You can check that out at my website, nightlightastrology.com. Go to the certification page. If you have questions, you can email me at nightlightastrology@gmail.com. So all of that being said, there are a few transits coming along this week that are, sort of a big deal. So we're going to check those out today. One trick of the trade that I always tell people is, maybe the handiest place to start tracking transits if you're sort of new, you've got a program or you're using a software online somewhere and you're tracking the transits and you're saying, what's important? There's so many planets in the sky, there's so many symbols, especially if you start using asteroids, where do I even start? So one of the easiest places to start is with the moon. The moon is like our daily, astrological barometer. The moon is just about to move into Aries, which is a spring fire sign and the sign of Mars. Now, the reason that this is important is because Mars, in the meantime, is in its fall in Cancer and gradually approaching big and, I will say, slightly worrisome oppositions to South Node, Saturn, and Pluto later on in June. The next couple of days could be a really good foreshadowing for what that Mars opposition is going to be about. So just kind of keep your eye on where tempers or moods are a little bit or flaring or are a little more volatile over the next few days, because this Mars transit is just a little bit more punchy and potentially more emotionally volatile. So you might see that over the next few days with Moon in Aries, a fire sign, hosted by Mars in its fall in a water sign. So, water and fire, you get that kind of boiling effect, and that can be difficult. So that's something to keep your eye on the next few days. However, Mars, as the moon is in Aries, Mars is not making any major transits, which is important. But what else is happening this week? Well, check this out. If we speed things up just a little bit here, what you're going to see is that already Mercury is getting into a square with Neptune. Mercury is also moving through an opposition to Jupiter, right? So that's creating a T-square. And this is really the news of the week as far as I can tell. The end of the moon cycle is winding down here in the next few days, right? We've got a new moon coming through pretty quickly on like June 2nd, June 3rd, right around there. June 3rd, I believe it's going to be. So the new moon's, coming through, and we'll have, the moon in Aries and the moon in Taurus on the late waning half of the cycle. So some Mars and Venus action towards the end of the cycle here that the moon is highlighting, which doesn't necessarily emphasize the T-square. So the moon's not necessarily highlighting it, but it's so powerful and so exact that I'm anticipating that it's going to be quite a big deal. So when you get into a T-square, what you have to do is look at each of the three parts of the T-square and get to know its archetypal nature, and then get to know which planetary dispositors or hosts have a lot of power here. Well, in this T-square, we see Mercury in its own sign, so doesn't rely on anyone else in Gemini. We see Jupiter in Sagittarius in its own sign, not relying on anyone else. And then we see Neptune at the 90-degree marker between the two of them in Pisces, which is also Jupiter's sign. So Jupiter and Neptune have some reception here, which is nice, but Mercury does not, right? So this is a very interesting moment when you're looking overall at the next month ahead and knowing that Jupiter and Neptune are going through a bit of a dance. What kind of things could you expect just from the Jupiter-Neptune dynamic? Because Mercury's movement through their field is relatively quick. So Jupiter-Neptune dynamics are often about the expansion or growth Jupiter, or the abundance Jupiter of something that is dreamlike or imaginative or based in fantasy and sometimes even delusion. So, for example, big plans, big ideas, big dreams that are not necessarily rooted in reality, but that take hold and capture you or grab you somehow. That's a possibility for a Jupiter-Neptune square. On the other hand, you have Neptune doesn't always have to be about delusion or fantasy. Neptune can also be about something transcendent, something that's capturing our hearts or our minds or our imaginations, that's trying to bring us to a higher place. So sometimes you'll see, expansive and imaginative themes in art, in film, culture, literature, music. You'll see themes of high fantasy and high adventure and space travel, and this theme of kind of going beyond the known into a mystical or magical place. And so this theme of kind of expanded states of consciousness or imaginative adventurousness, these are also Jupiter-Neptune dynamics, basically. So that's the positive side of Jupiter-Neptune. It's great for a renewal or restoration of faith, for themes of redemption and hope, for themes of kind of almost so kind of has a miraculous feeling to it. Jupiter is victory. Jupiter is, like, for example, when Jupiter and Uranus are together, you'll often see near-death accidents where somehow there's a miraculous way that someone has of surviving. The reason for that is that Uranus is often kind of the sudden accidental or the sudden shock, and Jupiter will be that saving grace that comes in and suddenly saves the day. So similarly with Jupiter-Neptune, you have kind of the miraculous. You think of some of the stories of saints who perform miracles, or the miraculous cure, or announcement of some kind of miracle treatment or miracle drug. Or sometimes also on the dark side, you have stories about people taking steroids or big scandals involving, ways that people have had of getting ahead or of growing Jupiter. They're, like growing your muscles big with a drug that's illegal. So this kind of theme of trying to get ahead or trying to be bigger and using some kind of cheating technique or something like that. Those are also Jupiter-Neptune signatures. So that gives you a little feeling for what Jupiter-Neptune can do. It can be miraculous, it can redeem, it can expand your faith, it can take you to marvelous other worlds, something magical can happen that's truly supportive and growth-oriented. But you also have to be careful of, as always, like trying to get high on being a victim. That's a Jupiter-Neptune thing, like the self-righteousness or the kind of getting high on ourselves because of our pain or our suffering, or the ways in which we have been a victim of different forces in life. Sometimes we use those things to try and get something, or to try and get revenge, or to try and feel good about ourselves. And you have to be really careful of that with Jupiter-Neptune. But also sometimes there is this feeling of redemption, of being redeemed, or of something truly sort of magical happening. So those are all Jupiter-Neptune dynamics. Now, what happens when you throw Mercury in the mix of it? Well, Mercury is a planet as opposed to Jupiter. It's naturally opposed to Jupiter. That's why when we see Mercury in its own sign in Gemini and Jupiter in its own sign in Sagittarius, they're naturally opposed to each other. Whereas Jupiter likes to confirm and grow things and make them bigger and more expansive, Mercury is a planet that likes to contest. For example, in ancient astrology, Mercury was connected to sports, and any kinds of, like William Lilly talks about Mercury, if I remember correctly, in terms of court games where you're going up and down the basketball court, for example, or there's a lot of back and forth, or throwing something up into the air, how many, like someone says something, they're really like, yes, it's going to be like this. It's going to be a great day. We're going to have a fun time at the park. And then someone just says, yeah, maybe. Right. So what they're doing is, like, in a sense, you have this image of Jupiter trying to confirm or grant some blessing. It's going to be good. Right. Jupiter. Mercury says, takes that and throws it up and says, maybe, you know. So, so Mercury can be like that, where Mercury's presence over the next few days may have something to do with calling into question, scrutinizing, or introducing some degree of skepticism or careful, rational discerning and thinking into the mix of something that is otherwise very hopeful, adventurous, sort of riding on a wave of enthusiasm or charisma. And now you're introducing this intensely rational component, or a Mercury that may want to look very carefully at things, or, you know, may want to examine the details. The other thing you have to think about, though, is on the negative, is that Mercury is sometimes, you know, sort of patron of doubt and skepticism and the intellectual. And sometimes the intellectual, you know, can be a joy kill, can be a buzz kill, right? So, you know, you get a confirmation from the universe. You know what that's like. I think probably people listening know what that's like. You're praying about something, you're thinking about something, and what do I do, or how do I handle this? And you get a sign. You know, maybe it comes in a dream, maybe something happens in your life and just, now I know. If you're around somebody who's really mercurial and you share that with them, you know, it's like casting your pearl before swine. You'll be like, oh man, I shouldn't have told that person, because immediately they were like, yeah, but you know, that's just kind of magical thinking. Or, you know, they'll have a way of making you try to doubt something that was just confirmed to you in an intuitive, maybe non-ordinary, you know, kind of way. So sometimes Mercury in the mix of this kind of a situation can also be about the healthy presence of discernment, skepticism, rationality versus the unhealthy presence of those features. Sometimes, you know, we think that if I count all of the grains of sand on the beach of infinity, that then I'll finally know divinity. Then I'll finally, you know, I'll get somewhere. But, you know, if we step back and really think about infinity and just take it into our hearts, you can very quickly realize that there's no need to count all of the grains of sand on the beach. You can just look and be like, wow, there's never ending grains of sand on the beach, and just arriving at that conclusion and surrendering the need of the mind to count it all. You know, a lot of the times that's the thing that we struggle with most in spirituality, because we spend our lives, you know, filled with opinions, filled with constantly, you know, we watch the news, we see everything streaming on social media, and we're just constantly duking it out mentally with other people. Well, this is what's right and that's what's wrong. This is what's going to solve it. And this is immoral. This is hypocritical. This is right. Right. We get into this all the time. And very rarely when we're in that state, you know, are we seeing with eyes of compassion, right? Or are we surrendered to the vastness of reality? It's very hard to just sit back and shut the mind off and just accept things as they are. That's not to say that the mind doesn't have a purpose either, because the opposite extreme is sometimes people don't think enough. You know, they take things on faith and they don't use a little bit of careful thinking. So you see those extremes can come in right now. Careful thinking that is being abandoned in favor of some kind of, you know, rose-colored glasses, or you're kind of being led down the primrose path somehow. On the other hand, you can have overly critical thinking that shuts down some kind of magic or some kind of intuition. So, you know, watch for those extremes in the week ahead. The other thing that can happen is that it's a wonderful time. I'll back up and just say this. When Mercury, Jupiter, and Neptune all get together and synthesize in a nice way, that you've got kind of the tensions being held, but without collapsing into any extreme on either side of these polarities, then you have the potential for, you know, it's like going on a Zen retreat, right? Where on some level you're shutting off the mind, but maybe another part of the day you're sitting and studying Zen philosophy, right? So some kind of educational or learning process, or you know, some kind of something related to academics or teachers and mentors who have the ability to teach something that's both technical or mental or rational or intellectual or skill-based, like learning a new skill. But also there's some deeper philosophical or intuitive or even faith-based component to the journey of learning. That's a Mercury, Jupiter, Neptune kind of thing. Or for example, think of music or art that is completely beautiful, but also has a message, has some kind of rhetorical argument or case to make. These are the kinds of syntheses that you might also see right now. So watch this over the next few days, because this will be pretty acute. And then know that in June, we're going to see the same T-square activated by the sun and by Venus. And so what starts off right now, in some ways, we're talking about the kind of mercurial component of this Jupiter-Neptune dance. We're also going to have to talk about the solar component and the Venusian component. And when Sun and Venus get in here, those are two other archetypal fields crossing with Jupiter-Neptune that are going to be really interesting in June. And hopefully they'll add something transcendent to the otherwise kind of intense looking Mars opposition that's approaching. Mars and Mercury will both get together, and while Mars is in its fall and oppose Saturn and Pluto. And I've got to tell you, that has the feeling of a more intense planetary dynamic in June. That's like, I've got red around that one in June. That might be a doozy. So it's going to be nice to have this Jupiter-Neptune backdrop, because it does bring some kind of transcendent vision. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot of space to see the bigger picture right now. It can be really redemptive and inspiring and expansive. And so this T-square right now, I thought it would be a good time to introduce it, because it's also going to play, I think, something like it has this kind of current that's running through all of June that should give a little bit of a buffer to the harshness of the Mars oppositions that are coming. So at any rate, we'll talk more about this next month. I hope that you all are having a great week. I'm back to writing horoscopes today. I'm preparing my June overview, all of which, the things I was just talking about, all of which will be included in the June overview. So stay tuned. In the meantime, like I said, my new class starts on June 9th. I'd love to have some of you in it if you want to come study Hellenistic astrology for a year. It's a great course. If you have any questions about it, feel free to let me know. Early bird rate ends on May 31st. You still have a few days to sign up and save really big on the course. You can, of course, use need-based tuition if you're in a financially challenging moment in your life. You're full-time, single parent, or you're full-time student, or only working part-time, or unemployed, or on disability, or retired and on a fixed income. Whatever your case might be, there's also need-based tuition. I try to make this class really accessible to anyone. And then there's a full tuition option with 12-month payment plan. And then, like I said, the early bird rate, which is the best deal, is available for about 3 more days. So thank you guys so much, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Take care, everyone. Bye.